Welcome to my Patagonia extension video. Shirley and I just recently got back from a fantastic 11-day Antarctica cruise with Viking Polaris. I made a separate video about that, but I want to now give you a little introduction to our 5-day extension after the actual cruise. We went to Patagonia. Prior to this trip, I didn't know that much about Patagonia. I knew it was a beautiful scenery with mountains, glaciers, and lakes. I knew it was in South America, but I didn't really know much about it. So the extension was 5 nights and 6 days. It involved 2 air flights, one from Ushuaia to El Calafate, and at the end, we flight from Punta Arenas to Santiago. In between, there was a lot of bus rides. We had a 2-night stay at the hotel in El Calafate and 2 nights in Puerto Natales and 1 night in the Santiago Ritz Hotel. So please enjoy this video. I'll give you a better idea of what to expect if you ever decide to go on this type of extension. To begin our excursion to Patagonia, we left the cruise ship fairly early in the morning, about 9 a.m. We flew from Ushuaia to a city called El Calafate, which is considered the gateway to Patagonia. This city is located on the east of the Andes and is therefore very dry. The drive to the Hotel Zelina had a very nice view of Lake Argentino. This lake is fed by glacier runoff, and because it was still fairly early in the springtime, the lake was fairly low. There was about a half a mile of marshland between the edge of the road out to where the water began. This is excellent environment for birds, and we did see a large flock of flamingos. Glaciers melted later in the summer. The lake would come all the way up to the edge, very close to the hotel. In the afternoon, we went on an excursion to a small local mountain that was about 2,500 feet tall. We boarded a 4x4 expedition vehicle and drove up the fairly steep hill, with some of the grades being about 30 degrees. This is some of the steepest roads I've ever been up and down in my life. Once we got to the very top of the mountain, we had probably the strongest winds I've ever experienced in my life. I would estimate about 80 to 90 miles an hour on top of this hill. Shirley did not even get off the bus, and I was only out for about 45 seconds before the sand blasted my pants and started to actually hurt. So I could not actually stay out very long at the very top of the mountain. One unfortunate traveler with us had his eyeglasses blown off his head, and he spent about 10 minutes looking to try to find them and never did find them. But miraculously, somebody on a later tour did find them and returned him the following day, so that was a little bit of a miracle. After that brief stop at the top of the hill, we descended halfway down the hill to where there was a very nice forest area. We were able to hike through that forest for about half an hour and had some nice scenery from that. The next stop after that was a ranch that catered to tourists coming through with snacks and tea service in their restaurant. This ranch had originally been a sheep farm many years ago and was very, very large. However, nowadays people do not buy as many wool garments, and therefore the price of wool has collapsed. A sheep farmer in Argentina can shear his sheep once a year and only get about $10 worth of wool off the sheep, so it's not a very economically viable activity anymore. So now these ranchers are turning to tourism. This particular ranch had horseback riding, zip lines, in addition to the excursion buses going up and down the property. During our trip through El Calafate, we saw large stretches of land that had very little human activity, with no sheep farming or any other crops being grown. The day 2 activity for our Patagonia extension mainly comprised a full day tour of the Glacier National Park. After a drive of a couple hours, we entered the park where the main attraction was a very large glacier that we were able to get fairly close to and get good views. A couple of noteworthy things about this glacier is the surrounding forest and the fact that the glacier is advancing toward a mountain on the other side of the valley. Almost all the glaciers in the world don't have any surrounding trees and go into the ocean, but this is somewhat unique. When we were there, there was a gap of about 100 yards between the edge of the glacier and the opposing mountain, so there was still a little, basically a waterway or river going next to the edge of the glacier. About every few years, what will happen is the glacier will advance to the other side of the mountain and form a dam. Therefore, thereafter, the water will build up behind the glacier and be about 40 feet higher than the other side of the lake. Then after a few months or a year of this, it will wear through the ice and actually break through and form a big collapse of part of the glacier. This happens about every 2 to 10 years and is a kind of a unique feature of this particular glacier. The park itself was developed about 20 years ago and consisted entirely of raised walkway with a metal grate to walk on with handrails. This was such a smooth and stable surface you could actually walk along and enjoy the scenery rather than having to look down and watching your step. The glacier made a few loud cracks and pops, but we did not see any actual calving. When we got back to El Calafate, it was just about time for the World Cup soccer match to start between Argentina and Mexico. This was the second game of 3 in the group stage, and Argentina had already lost to Saudi Arabia, a team that they should have beaten easily. Every game from here on out was a must-win, so I decided to go downtown El Calafate and be in a bar to watch the game with the local Argentinos. It was very exciting to see how excited they were about it. Unfortunately, Argentina won 2-0, but it was really a crazy celebration afterwards in a small little town. People were driving up and down the 8 blocks of the main downtown area, honking their horns and celebrating for hours after the match had ended. I can't imagine anything happening in America that would unite the entire population in pure joy as I was witnessing here. Of course, I had to jump on the bandwagon and I bought a Lionel Messi number 10 jersey right after the game. Day 3 was mostly a driving day going down to Puerto Nuevo, where we checked into a unique hotel called the Singular. This property used to be a cold storage facility that was built about 100 years ago, but now it's converted to a hotel. The outside of the hotel looked more like a barn than a hotel, and our bus driver had never been here before. I had to drive around a couple of times to even find out where the entrance was to the hotel. Once inside the building, the decor was half ultra-modern floors and glass walls and half industrial warehouse with 100-year-old equipment still in its original position and nicely lit and displayed. It really felt like you're walking through a museum. Our room itself had a great view facing the fjord. That evening I was able to get out and do some bird photography because there are a wide variety of birds right outside our back window. Day 4, this was a full day, 11-hour tour of the Torres del Paine National Park. The main attraction here was the Central Massif with towering peaks and sheer vertical rock walls of 2,000 to 3,000 feet high. The day before we got a good view of these mountains from about 40 miles away because it was a clear day. The weather when we actually did the tour was cloudy and rainy, and we couldn't really see the mountains very well. We did see some wildlife, however, mostly guanacos, which are a lot like the llamas seen further north in South America. When we saw a pack of guanacos, there was usually one larger one, the male, and 8 to 10 smaller ones, the female. As far as how one male gets chosen to lead the pack, there are often fights for dominance between the existing leader and any up-and-coming young bucks who want to take over. The fight often involves one male trying to castrate his rival by biting off his nutsack. If he's successful, he gets all the females. The loser tends to have a solitary life after that. The winner will then chase the females and bite them over and over again until they're exhausted, and then he mates with them. So that is apparently the way the dating scene works down here. We were also very fortunate to see a couple of pumas in the wild. These sightings are rare enough that some of our tour guides go a whole year without seeing one. The 2 young pumas we saw were about 500 yards away and needed binoculars or a camera with a telephoto lens to even see them. In years past, the pumas were hunted by the sheep farmers where they could come down and kill their sheep. Now that sheep farming is in decline, the guanaco and puma populations are recovering. Even the vegetation is returning to normal because the sheep are not overgrazing the land like they did for hundreds of years. The most beautiful part of the day was a wonderful hike to a waterfall that was about a 15-minute walk from where the bus stopped. A ton of wonderful pictures were taken there. After the usual overly large lunch, we had a short drive to the hike across the sandbar covering the part of the lake. The hike turned out to be a 2-hour hike across the lake and then up to a viewpoint to see the glacier. We got some very nice pictures of this, and finally toward the end of the afternoon finished this portion of the hike. After that we had a 2-hour curvy, bumpy gravel road ride to get back on the main highway. That made me a little bit car sick, but the rest of the day was really nice. Day 5 was another travel day. We departed the hotel at 9 a.m. and took a 2-hour bus ride to the airport at Puntas Arenas. 2 hours waiting at the airport and a 3-hour flight to Santiago, then collect our luggage and transfer to the Ritz-Carlton in Santiago with dinner on our own for that evening. The flight from Punta Arenas to Santiago was supposed to be one of the most spectacular views you can get on an airplane, but we had aisle seats, not window seats, and it was cloudy anyway, so we didn't get much of a view. When we did get to the hotel in Santiago, there was a large group of fans outside the hotel waiting for Harry Styles, a singer in a boy band, to come out, and they were hanging around all day and cheering for him. It was kind of an unusual scenery there. Santiago had a very tall skyscraper in the middle of the city, which was the tallest building in Latin America. We went up to the top of that and had a very nice view of the overall area around Santiago. And at the end, we finally came home and flew back late that evening. A very nice trip overall.